So today, folks, I have the distinct pleasure of welcoming, I'd like to call her a friend and colleague, Jenna Doherty. Did I pronounce that right?
You did, Doherty, yeah.
Yep. Jenna Doherty is a passionate trans advocate who looks to bridge the gap with anyone who wants to push humanity forward. Homeschooled by fundamentalist Christians, she left the religion behind, but kept the proactive nature of her parents' activism and applies it to her more secular activities and advocacy. Her knowledge of the Christian culture is why she tries to humanize her people in the Christian community in hopes to help them understand the struggle of being trans. And while the survival of her people continues to be her number one focus, she realizes that long-term safety can't come without ensuring the rights of all Americans are secured. She believes that aggressive but open-minded populism is what helps bridge the divide caused by our divisive partisan culture. She believes in the good of humanity and hopes that to be one of the voices that can make Americans see how much more we have in common than what divides us. And let me just welcome Jenna Doherty to our pulpit today.
I just want to say thank you so much to everybody here, to Reverend Johnny at UU Fellowship for giving me this opportunity to speak. I know it's crazy to many, but it's truly a dream of mine as a trans woman to be able to stand in a church and to be able to humanize us in the trans community to the flock. Speaking to a congregation as the woman I was meant to be truly is quite surreal. It's a dream come true. And it's something that I hope to continue to do. To quote the great Michael W. Smith, he broke the old rules steeped in tradition. He tore the holy veil away, questioning those in powerful position, running to those who called his name. But nobody knew his secret ambition was to give his life away. That was the image of Jesus I was taught, the champion of the marginalized and the vulnerable, while being a thorn in the side of the rich and powerful, religious elites. For being as radical and fundamentalist as my parents were, they still had a moral compass and genuinely believed in what they felt was a righteous cause, and they truly believed that they had to train us in their ways. I mean, I came out of the womb and my parents said, "Here's your Bible." I went to church 3 times a week, including Awana on Wednesday nights. It was the only interaction with kids my age. We would get mailers from the Heritage Foundation. My mom would play Rush Limbaugh while we did our schoolwork. And my dad even took me to an anti-abortion protest when I was 8 years old. I was literally raised in a Christian nationalist incubator. But going back to age 5, I always knew that I was different. I knew that feelings inside of me were different from the heavy and intense expectations my parents had put on me. I used to sit in my bed at night and I'd ask God to please turn me into a girl. This was something I knew I couldn't tell my parents, because I knew that they wouldn't accept me and probably force me into the male identity that was chosen for me. For many, many years, I struggled with such intense shame. I would dress in secret from time to time, but ultimately I would lie to myself by saying it was sinful, and I would ask God for forgiveness, and I would do this over and over and over and over again. This went on until I was 28 years old, when I finally found the strength to stop lying to myself and start living my truth as the woman that I was meant to be. From day one, I wanted to use my transition as a tool to educate anyone who was open-minded enough to listen. While I lost many people who refused to accept me for who I am, including close friends and my own dad, I was fortunate enough to retain many people I grew up with in church, and along with most of my family. I also made some incredible new friends who loved me for me. 10 years later, I am done with all my surgeries and I'm fully me. I am beyond privileged with the ability and opportunities to do what I truly feel that I was born to do. Help those understand who we are and what we are all about, especially in this time of rising fascism, where those in charge are the very same religious elites that Jesus gave his life to defeat. If Jesus was on earth today, no doubt he would be an advocate for the trans community. I truly believe from the bottom of my heart that even though I'm agnostic, it is my duty to humanize us to those in the church who don't see it. I truly believe that those who spew pure evil, want to erase us from society, are a very small minority, albeit a very loud and powerful minority, but a minority nonetheless. If given the chance to learn, I truly believe that a majority of people are good and will side with us over those who only have hate in their heart. Thank you again so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Trans rights are human rights.
So, to caveat this, I want to preface that Jenna has been enthusiastic about answering any and all questions, including some of the ones that you aren't supposed to ask. She's 100% willing to address any question, but reserves the right to withdraw consent if the question is far too personal. So, if anybody has anything that they wish to ask Jenna at this time, you're welcome to come up. Introduce yourself to her, and we're going to go ahead and just ask Jenna some questions and have a conversation with her for a little bit, and then we're going to wrap up our service a little bit early today so that those of us that feel inclined can go march in pride. I wanted to just address something that I know that a lot of our fellowship probably may not be aware of. Is this on? Yes, okay. Everybody can hear me? Perfect. Can you explain to everybody what a dead name is and why it's not an acceptable way of addressing a trans person?
Oh yeah, sure, absolutely. Dead name is basically like the legal name that was given to us when we were born. And a lot of cis people, they don't quite comprehend the fact that we work incredibly hard to disassociate with ourselves from that identity that was given to us at birth. They kind of see it as like a nickname, which I understand how they can come to that conclusion. Cis people, for the most part, tend to come at it from two ways. It's either just like honest ignorance, which I'm okay with, I just tell them, hey, we don't associate that person as, for lack of a better phrase, I guess, dead and gone, and even though I'm still alive. And then there's some that just love to dead name us because they like to be nasty and try to bring us down. Either way, we don't appreciate being dead named because we're not that person anymore. We sacrificed a lot. Many of us lose our entire family, and get rejected from society just to be who we are. And so we work very hard to build this identity that matches who we truly are. So.
Let's talk pronouns. I know that yours are she and her. Mm-hmm. Am I correct?
Yes.
And mine are he, they. I was recently asked why I prefer he, they. And for me, it encompasses who I am on the gender spectrum. I can expound on that, but you all have heard, and those of you that were here last year heard me talk about this. So why are pronouns so important? Why do you think that they're so important? Just out of curiosity.
I guess it just comes back with the whole dead name scenario, right? Society, and this is really just more like kind of a Western patriarchal thing for the most part, has put gender into a box and it's limited to two, she and he. And it's like you said, gender's on the spectrum. And it's whatever that person feels in their heart and who they are, they'd be able to express themselves, right? If we didn't have to have any identification markers at all, that would probably be better because it's more individual. But, we use the gender spectrum, And wherever you fall on it, you're he, they, I'm, she, her. Some of them use neopronouns, which are even more specific. And for the most part, it's hard to get people to start to think outside of the patriarchal, Western interpretation of gender that's only been around for not even very long. For many years, for thousands of years, so many different cultures long before us had a much more fluid and spiritual interpretation of gender. So it's just a concept that a lot of people, especially in our culture, are just going to have to be used to. It's whatever you feel comfortable expressing yourself and identifying, that's who you are, and that's how people should respect you.
And that goes back to the term cisgender and transgender. I know that I rebelled. I rebelled against the idea of being called cisgender because my knowledge of chemistry or even biology meant that cis was something wrong. The first thing that came to mind was cystic. So I was like, why would I want to be called that? But then I understood, education. I got better. I understood what there was a difference between cis and trans. Trans means that you're transforming quite literally to a different identity along the gender spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
So, just before I keep going on, does anybody else have any other questions that they want to ask Jenna?
What gave you the courage to confront yourself at age 28?
The question was, what gave you the courage to confront yourself at age 28?
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that question because it's incredibly hard, especially coming from my background where I was raised Christian fundamentalist. And they have such a tight grip on being able to freely express your own individual identity because everything has to always be funneled back to the cis, heterosexual, patriarchal Christian identity of man and woman and insubordination and all this stuff. And it's oddly enough, my parents raised me to be able to question so many different things. Of course, religion was not a question, but they really did strive to be able to teach us how to think for ourselves and be able to stand in your truth and your principles, even if no one is standing with you. And for me, there were so many events in my life where I tried to suppress who I was because of so many different pressures. Not just the grip that Christianity, Christian culture, especially the fundamentalist culture has on our society, but also being raised in a male identity. There's so much toxic masculinity that weighs you down. And I got to the point where I was so sick and tired of everything bringing me down from my upbringing to this toxic masculine culture that we have. And here and there I was experimenting, most of the time in secret, nobody knew. And by the time I got to 28 years old, and this is unfortunate to a certain degree, Caitlyn Jenner was part of my catalyst. Now I'm going to say that Caitlyn Jenner is what we call a pick-me, and very, very problematic. Puts her desire to be accepted over the rights and struggles of our people. But that being said, at the time that she came out, it was a huge catalyst for me. Because someone it was the first time an A-list celebrity had come out and said, I'm going to transition. And everything that she said in that last interview as her former self hit at home. Especially when she was asked by Diane Sawyer, why now at 65? Why are you coming out so late? And she said, I didn't want to spend the rest of my life thinking, what if? And I remember thinking at that age, 28, I was like, oh wow, I'm so old now, I can't transition. Oh, this testosterone has done so much damage to me. And her saying that, I was like, wow, 65? Okay. I'm like, half that. I can totally do this. And so I just decided, I'd rather be true to myself than live a lie and be sad. And I knew that when I came out, it was going to be a lot for people to handle, and it wasn't going to be able to ever, quote unquote, live a normal life ever again. But that didn't matter to me, because the quote unquote normal life that I lived for 28 years made me sad. And I was a very happy, confident, person, but I wasn't content. And I knew that if I went the rest of my life not being content, that would just eat at me. And so it was really, for like every other trans person, we had no choice. I had no choice. And so I just said, I'm going to do it. Consequences be damned. So.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us that are in that queer, I call it the alphabet mafia, legitimate mafia. Those of us that identify as in the queer family, we get that fear of rejection and what's going to happen, what's next for us. On a Facebook post dated August 17th, you celebrated the fact that you got your vagina in January. And yes, I know that that's pretty blunt to say that, but those were your words.
Actually, it was January 2024.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Even better. I was struck by the casualness in the way that you just mentioned your surgery, and tell us more about what that journey was like for you, if you don't mind.
Which one? I've had 5. I'll try to sum this up as quick as I can. Surgeries are a very personal thing for us, and it's always at that person's choice. You can choose to have none, you can choose to have as many as you feel leads to becoming the person that you are. And with everything else, with my transition, I like to talk about it openly and make cis people aware of just how incredibly hard it is to be able to reach these goals. Then on top of that, of course, you have society who's literally trying to use these surgeries as a way to weaponize it against us, specifically with trans children. They like to spread this lie that trans children are just like going to the doctor and saying, here, give me surgery. The next day the kid's going to school and getting surgery, and it's just nonsense. But at the same time, these surgeries are incredibly important. And so for me, I talk about how these surgeries are not only just important for trans people to be able to have access to, but it's literally, there's a reason why it's called gender-affirming care. It's literally life-saving in so many ways. And for me, when I came out, my goal as a trans person was, like anybody else, it's complicated, right? You want to be able to see yourself in the mirror and have that, affirmation like, oh, I am the woman I was meant to be. Not every trans person is going to have my journey, but we all express ourselves in similar ways. And for me, being able to have that full feminine look and experience is what was very affirming to me. Not everything, because I'm a spiritual person and there's so many different aspects to me, but this was a crucial thing to be able to look in the mirror every day. And I had breast augmentation. I had facial feminization surgery, and as he mentioned, I had my bottom surgery, which was my vagina. And from 2021 to 2024, I had 5 surgeries. I didn't know that I was going to be able to do them all. I came out in 2015, and I didn't even know if I was going to get one of them, let alone all of them. And that's why I said in my speech, I'm incredibly privileged and blessed to be able to have done what I've done. And because I've had all of these surgeries, I feel this immense obligation now to be able to put myself out there and speak to people about our experiences because of the fact that I have nothing standing in my way anymore. I am a white, straight, trans woman. So the only reason why I'm marginalized is because I'm trans. And so for me, I just feel an overwhelming obligation to be able to speak, especially in this time of rising fascism, where we're one of the biggest political footballs. They use our rights and our, just ability to exist as a weapon against us. And so if I'm able to do just the tiniest amount to be able to reach enough people, I hope that I can continue to build on that. But again, it would be a lot harder for me if I didn't get to be able to have all these surgeries. So I hope in a long, roundabout way that made sense.
Yes.
And I see that there's a question.
Please.
Yes, now that you've transitioned as a woman, have you noticed that you are the subject of sexism?
All the time.
Yes. So I think growing up men have privilege, and they can, and then when they transition, they're subject to, they realize what we as biological women or cis women undergo, and and it's easier, I think, in some cases, to start out as a man because you're privileged, and then when you transition, you're subject to sexism. Did you have that experience?
So I really appreciate that question, and I totally 100% agree with that statement. A woman in the audience asked, now that I've transitioned, do I experience sexism that cis women would face growing up? And the answer is yes. And I always acknowledge this when I talk with people that, yes, I grew up with male privilege. And, but as soon as you start transitioning, that all goes away. And in some ways, we tend to deal with even more intense discrimination because of our trans status. Because not only are we getting it from cis men, but sometimes we get it from cis women who see us as a threat, or they see us as we somehow skipped the line, right? As we somehow we didn't experience the same as they did growing up. And I would be the first to admit, yeah, I did not experience discrimination as a young person, as a young woman, because I was identifying, quote unquote, as a male. But at the same time, I do truly believe, to a certain degree, and I don't like to play oppression Olympics because we all have to deal with discrimination in our own ways. There's discrimination that cis women face that I don't, and there's discrimination that we face as trans women that cis women don't. I do have a fun story. We always call it in the trans community, as trans women, as we won, but at what cost? And that is, you experience regular misogyny without the trans misogyny or the homophobia. And I was talking football with this guy at a bar one time, and we were chatting in depth about football. And he stops me, he looks at me, and then he turns to his friend, and he goes, "Dude, this chick knows football." And I had that moment of realization. I'm like, oh, he thinks I'm cis. Okay, cool. He's not going to discriminate against me. But wait a minute, that was also misogyny, right? And so it was a fun little wow, I won, but at what cost? So there's so many different nuances with gender discrimination. So I really appreciate that you brought that up.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
What advice can you give somebody who their child is transitioning and they're struggling with the acceptance of?
The question was, what advice would you give to somebody whose child is transitioning and they're struggling with the exception or the exception of it?
That's a great question, and I really appreciate that because I've had to deal with this with my mom. It's tough because we should be able to live our truth and not have to deal with discrimination and not being accepted, especially from those who are supposed to love us unconditionally. It is nuanced, obviously. And this is not to give the parents a pass because they should be working as hard as they can to be able to come to terms with the fact that the child that they raised and named is ultimately an individual and gets to decide how they identify and who they get to be. But there's attachment that a parent has. I don't understand it. But I have a sibling that transitioned and is incredibly supportive as I am. It also took me a minute to get used to because I knew them by another name and another gender. And your brain just kind of automatically goes to that name and that gender. And with my mom, I had to tell her, I understand, you named me, and for 28 years I was this name and this gender. I'm not going to hold it against you if you make a mistake. But if you're going to intentionally tell me that you don't accept me because of my individual choice, then you're being discriminatory. And so it's really hard because it takes patience and it takes willingness to show unconditional love on both sides. And you have to be able to take it every day and just say, I love this person, and I know that at the end of the day, if I give them the space to be able to come to terms with it while still holding them accountable and expecting them to eventually see some change, for me, I just tell myself, at the end of the day, I did my part. And whether or not they choose to come around is going to be on them. But it's a fluid, long situation that requires more than just one or two conversations. But also just always be willing to love and accept the person for who they are.
I resonate with that because I get this feeling that a lot of parents are very deeply attached to the name they gave their child.
Yeah.
And I had that argument with my kid the other day. It's like he said, I don't like it when you call me my nickname. But I've always called you by your nickname. And we came to an agreement that I would be the only one who calls you by that nickname.
Yeah.
I am his dad. So, any other questions?
So I have a good friend who was and still is a professor and had actually a publication record before the transition and is referring to it with a specific now being a woman with even the publications in a different name and a whole bunch of footnotes why that is still the same person. Are there things in your life that you are proud of before the transition that you refer to?
So the question was, the example was given of a person who had published academic journals in their previous name, in their dead name, and that they referred back to it in footnotes pretty regularly that was who they were before, and that this was their work. Is there anything in your previous incarnation that you're proud of that you carry with you, but that you refer to as pre-transition, or that you have to footnote as that was before your change?
Yeah, I actually really appreciate that question because, like all of these questions have been so great because these are a lot of questions that cis people, for whatever reason, don't feel comfortable asking. And I understand why to a certain degree, right? But one of the things I always tell people is, first off, to answer that question, yes, there's actually a lot that I did when I was my former self, which is how I refer to that person, that I'm very proud of, because I tell people that the person that I was before was just kind of like a place to keep and protect the person that was eventually I was going to become, right? And I was still that person though. And a lot of my ideas and beliefs that I had then, I still carry now. I just like to consider myself as, I'm still that person, but I've evolved. And, but when it comes to that specific topic of addressing our identity in the past, sometimes cis people can't quite make the connection that, like, just because I went by that name, then doesn't mean that you can refer to that name still in the past. I know that's confusing sometimes, but that dichotomy of the person that you were and the person that you are now can be complicated. And so I like to address that, like I said, as kind of like as a combination. I'm still the same person, but I've evolved. Because I wouldn't be sitting on this stage as Jenna talking to you if I didn't go through that part of my life, right? And I'm actually pretty proud of the fact that I tell people all the time, the reason why I feel so comfortable sitting in church is because I was raised in a Christian fundamentalist culture, and I know the language by the back of my hand. I always refer to Christians as, when I talk to Christians about Jesus, and I say, you know, if Jesus was on earth today, would he be hanging out with MAGA or would he be hanging out with LGBTQ people? I think everybody in this church knows the answer to that, right? He'd be hanging out with LGBTQ people and immigrants being harassed by ICE and all other kinds of marginalized groups in this country who are being harassed by the white supremacist powers of it, that are in our institutions. So, like everything else, it's a complicated topic that requires nuance, and I really appreciate the fact that you're willing to feel comfortable and ask me that question.
So, we're going to wrap it up now. Thank you so much, Jen. I really appreciate you. It's kind of like I would love to keep talking about. I want you to get to Pride, and I know I want to get to Pride. And there's several folks here that need to get to Pride.
Yeah.
So let's wrap it up. Thank you so much, Jenna Doherty, for your wisdom and your courage coming to speak with us today. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so everybody. Thank you so much. Really, I appreciate it.